Today we're looking at part two of history, module number two, where we're going to be looking at traditions and their origins. The way I'm going to be doing this is there are two timelines. There is the timeline through life, and then there's the timeline through the year. I find it really fascinating, and it's quite a quick lesson. It's more about realizing how everything is connected from the past, and from here also you'll be able to complete part two when you join the dots. So basically, largely rooted in folklore and religion, Maltese customs and traditions are passed on from one generation to another and are still clearly visible in everyday life, which is true for all cultures. Now here we have an advert coming out from the Ministry of Tourism. What I like about it is in this advert, every little scene, every little capture highlights elements of Maltese society which tourists find, unique to the Maltese cultural identity, and it reflects the echoes from the past. So you can see that, famous Pastizzi, we are a coffee drinkers socially. We're not tea drinkers. We drink tea at home or at work, but in social environment, we are more into our espressos, cappuccinos, and now with the new brands, obviously into the lattes and those fancy drinks. But we love to socialize. We love to eat. We love life. So throughout this session, we shall be looking at customs and traditions in several areas of Maltese life, such as religion, religious festivals, secular celebrations, food, games, and sports and transport. Religion, from childhood to adulthood. So obviously we start with baptism, which is the first sacrament in the Christian religion, and in Maltese it's called Mamodia. So once babies are born, given their name, they are baptized in the church. And as you know, big party at home or someplace. The meaning of white color and water throughout the ages in society. So the importance of the water is that this associates with traditional religions going back to the Romans and before the Romans, where the bathing ritual is considered as a rite of passage, as in the water cleans your spirit. You recognize your weaknesses, your faults, and you atone for them. Obviously, the baptism itself is related in that, and of course, there is this direct connection with John the Baptist, the saint of the order of Saint John, the order of Malta, the Knights of Malta. Also, the color white reflects purity, innocence, which you see in baptism, First Holy Communion, and of course in marriage. Right, the man dresses up in black, and the white is in white, signifying purity. And I guess the men dress up in black today because it signifies our funeral, our end, as a joke. But there is this contrast between the colors. So focusing on the aspect of water, you start to see the depiction of St. John in art and its association, of course, with the Order of St. John. Now, moving into the ritual of bathing and baptism, once you start to see that in one religion, you start to see it in other places practiced around the world of different religions as well.
Let's dive right into our main theme for today. You know, without water, there's no life, yet water has the power to destroy as well as to create. The sacrament of baptism is, of course, mostly related to certain Christian streams, but water has a central place in the practices and beliefs of many other religions. Take a look at Maya Margit's report.
It's a rite of passage, and some believe it's necessary for salvation. Each religion follows its own form of ritual bathing. In Christianity, many baptize newborns in a special ceremony. A priest or minister pours or sprinkles holy water on a baby's head. But baptism is also something many Orthodox Christians undergo yearly during Epiphany. It's an icy bath for those willing to take the plunge. Celebrated in January, Epiphany marks the baptism of both Jesus Christ and John the Baptist in the Jordan River. In art, the baptism of Christ has been depicted again and again over the centuries. For observant Jews, ritual bathing happens more than once a year. Jewish men and women immerse themselves entirely naked in the bath, also known as a mikveh, for many different reasons, including but not limited to conversion, childbirth, and following sexual activity. Because it's a private ritual, the mikveh has rarely been depicted in art, though some artists have romanticized it, like Rembrandt in this famous painting of Bathsheba at her bath. In Hinduism, the holy dip takes place annually. Hundreds of thousands of pilgrims travel to the river Ganges each year. Hindus consider the river sacred and flock to it to celebrate a holy festival marking the day the goddess Ganga descended to the earth. In art, the Hindu goddess is usually represented as a beautiful woman wearing white, sitting atop a crocodile. Hindus believe that they have to bathe in the river at least once during their lifetime. From personal rituals to public ceremonies, ritual bathing is something billions dive into each year.
And we're lucky because with us in the studio now is Maya Margit, I-24 News Culture correspondent. Maya, you know, this ritual that we tend to relate to early Christianity, in fact, goes back to even more ancient times, right?
That's correct. And before I answer that question, I just want to mention that some Protestant denominations actually don't believe in infant baptism. They believe that it should be done at a later age and by full immersion. I just wanted to clarify that.
So let's go back to more ancient times. Where do we see this ritual?
Ancient Babylonians believed that water was for spiritual cleansing, for purification. In Egypt, newborn children were bathed in ritual waters from the Nile, which they also believed would purify these infants from blemishes that they had in the womb.
So can you maybe point out the differences between, different religions, different streams of Christianity when it comes to the baptism ritual?
Sure, it's actually quite complicated because every denomination has its own way of doing things. There's different ways, first of all, of doing baptism. There's sprinkling, which is pouring some water over the head, and then there's immersion, where the person goes completely underwater for a few seconds at least, and this is to get rid of original sin. In Judaism, some religious Orthodox Jews go each week to purify themselves before the Sabbath comes in. Women go before and after childbirth, to the mikveh before and after childbirth. You have people who are converting to Judaism who also go into the mikveh, and millions of Hindus actually go to the Kumbh Mela festival, as I mentioned, to bathe in the Ganges.
But if I'm not wrong, when you're talking about the mikveh, any source of water can be a mikveh, right? It doesn't need a specific location.
It depends on the kind of impurification you're trying to cleanse. Some impurifications have to be cleansed only with spring water or with well water.
Interesting, Maya Margit. Thank you so much for this information. And now we're taking a short break, but don't go too far away, because right after it, we'll take you on a tour to the beautiful village of En Karim, right nearby Jerusalem.
So the ritual of baptism is quite common in many cultures around the world. And now what I'm going to show you here is a bit of an extreme ritual to baptism. This is a news clip filmed in Georgia.
Alexandre, სახელითა მამისათა. ამინ. თალხისათა. ამინ. დასრულსაც მისათა. ამინ. ატა მარადის და ათერსიგებს მონახულსა დაჩი სახელითა მამისათა. ამინ. თალხისათა. ამინ. დასრულსაც მისათა. ამინ. ატა მარადის და
I personally think it's a bit excessive, but nobody seems to be complaining there. Okay, so baptism is when you're born, and then obviously we need another excuse to celebrate, to party. So we have Il-Uchiya. Il-Uchiya is celebrated on the first year's birthday of the child. Now, in the past, it was a celebration because you need to understand that 100 years ago, the birth rate was much higher than today, and the successful birth rate within children still living within the first year, regrettably, the death rate was very, very high as well. So there was a celebration. Il-Uchiya was to celebrate that your child has survived the first year, but it was done in a way that reflected on the child's future. Basically what happens is this: a number of items are placed in a tray or on a table, and the child has to pick one. Now obviously parents will influence the child to try and pick a certain item, because back then, as it is today, and we all know this coming from different cultures, that parents would want your child to be either a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer, an architect, that kind of expectation. And back then, of course, it was the expectation that the first boy becomes a priest, for example, and then the second becomes a doctor, then it becomes a lawyer. Luckily today, the Uchiya is celebrated more as an excuse for fun and family gathering, and no one really holds on to it. And it has been updated to include jobs that exist today. So you can see there's a mouse, for example, or a comb, because that person will be into hairdressing or fashion. Its history goes back to the 1700s, so from the time of the Knights, and is still practiced today in rural Malta. to give you an idea what the items are. So a stethoscope will be a doctor, geometry, architect, calculator, accountant, Bible, rosary beads, priest, or nun. Okay, you have the list over here. At the age of 7, we have the first Holy Communion, or in Maltese known as Il Pracet. Notice again the important significance of the color white in the dress code. And in the Pracet, the child receives for the first time the Holy Communion. The first Holy Communion is the second of the three sacraments of initiation, baptism, and confirmation, which complete an individual's membership to the Catholic community. The Eucharist sacrament is commonly called First Holy Communion and celebrates the real presence of Christ in the bread, wine, and gathered community. And what's really interesting is that if you look into the traditional past of religions that existed before Christianity, you'll start to see that certain customs were absorbed from other religions into Christianity. So that way, automatically, people could easily associate becoming Christian, and there was that the Roman Empire could easily sell it to the common people. In this case, this is based on the religion of Mithras, which was the soldiers' main religion. The third, the sacrament of confirmation in Maltese, is the Chrismatalis of all confirmation, usually around the age of 12. For this, the children, the young teenagers don't dress up in white. You dress up in your Sunday best. And the person who stands next to you is your anointed godmother or godfather. In the sacrament of confirmation, the baptized person is sealed with the gift of the Holy Spirit and is strengthened for service to the body of Christ. Weddings. Now, weddings in Malta is a really big thing, in that they can hit 300, 400 people easily. Of course, this style of wedding would be a stand-up reception style, with many bars and banquet tables, etc. What is also interesting is that many weddings happen in Malta, not by Maltese, but people who come here for a week or two. They choose Malta as their destination. One, because of the weather, and because of the beautiful many architectural sites that we have. Let me just share some common video clips that I've found. Sorry, don't know why the volume is off, but you get the idea. Weddings can last very, very long with fireworks and many, many types of food and drink. This is at in Nashar. As you can see here, the setup is for a seated banquet with people sitting on two sides. So you have the inner section and the outer section. Obviously, there will be a space from where other people can enter the middle and they don't crawl underneath the table or jump over the table. But you realize now the richness, what I mean by the different levels or different types of weddings that exist in Malta, that happen in Malta. Okay, so that is the traditions through the year. Now we're going to see the 12 months of joy and all the feasts that we have in Malta. We begin off with Festa de San Paul, which is held on 10th of February, celebrating the arrival of St. Paul and Malta's conversion to Christianity. I'm just going to show you some highlights. . So as you know, every fire festival has a fireworks. Fireworks reminisce the Great Siege and the siege of World War II. Everyone complains that they're very loud. Yes, that is true. But fireworks in Malta are taken to a whole new level with the Maltese Fireworks Festival. And with the fireworks at certain villages like Halia and Abba. Let's see where the statue is. There he is, the statue's over there, coming around the corner. This is the Basilica, the church, San Paolo Naufragio. Naufragio being Latin, being Italian, meaning the shipwreck. Held on the 10th of February in Valletta. And with saints, you'll find that there are many churches that have the same pattern. Speed this up. Why is he still there? Come on. There he comes. Right, here he comes. So you start to see that it's quite custom and tradition during the feasts here in Malta. We have statues, people dressing up, people carrying the statues, people carrying other items as well. Carnival. Now, carnival is very, very interesting. The history of the carnival, when you study it, you realize that going back 2,000, 3,000 years ago, carnival had a different purpose. What I mean by that is that the beginning of carnival actually began with the feast of Christmas. Now, may I remind you that in Nidra Temple in Malta and also Hajar-Im, they tell you the first day of spring, summer, autumn, winter. And Christmas and Carnival are tied into that period, as in the sense of knowing the first day of winter, knowing the first day of spring. And in the past, winter wasn't a one-day celebration, but it was a 4-day or a very long party to celebrate during the winter time, especially in Europe. The significance of it is that when you understand the movement of the sun on the horizon, the 21st of December is when the day stops getting short. In fact, 21st of December is the shortest day of the year and the longest night. And what happens is that as the Earth moves around, changes its elliptical movement around the sun, what happens is that as it's changing direction on the horizon, the sun stops for 3 days. So 21st, 22nd, 23rd, all right, so you have from 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th. On 24th, and the sunrise on the 25th, the sun actually starts moving in the other direction and the day starts getting long. So Christmas actually celebrates the sun god or the reincarnation of sun, and the idea that winter you're in the middle of winter. Obviously not for Maltese environment, not for Maltese climate, because our winter is actually Europe's spring summer, but there are rooted traditions and customs going way back with Christmas, the winter solstice, and the spring equinox, which we associate with Easter. So in the past, they would celebrate, because obviously during winter time you cannot work the fields, because in the past 99%, 95% of all society was agricultural based. So what can you do during winter time? Well, you can only take care of the flock, make sure that the winter doesn't kill off your animals. You need to stay warm. How do you stay warm? With bonfire. And that's why even today we have the Christmas log on the table for Christmas, because in the past, in the Roman times and otherwise, they would take a big log, a big trunk, and put it on fire and create a massive bonfire to celebrate that now the days are getting longer again, so winter will soon be over. To the end of that, you have Carnival, because Carnival today more represents, going back for the last 500 years and how we understand it in our era, Carnival is more associated with Easter. 2,000 years ago, it was more associated with the end of winter kind of thing, that spring is coming. Now, why is Easter important? Well, in the past, many religions celebrated spring. What is spring? Spring is the rebirth. How can you see it? Well, you see it because of the blossoming of the flowers. Animals start to mate. You start to see more animals appearing, the birth of animals. Animals come out of hibernation. Flowers blossom and bloom. And you start to see fruit growing and being ready for picking as well before summertime. So you have this period. In fact, today we refer to spring as the celebration of fertility, because we refer to it also in our language as Mother Nature. So this concept of femininity, fertility, celebration of life goes all the way back to the temples in Malta. And that's a far stretch, because we're talking 6,000, 8,000 years ago. Okay? Customs and ideas have changed in how we celebrate, but the hidden value, hidden meaning is there. So when you think about celebrating life, and you think about, okay, so Christmas is the idea that the winter, now the sun is starting to grow, okay? But it reaches its peak in spring, which then the longest day is 21st of June, which is summer. So you have this cycle going on. So when you think about Christmas and Carnival, why do we have the Christmas tree? Well, the Christmas tree is the fern tree, the green tree, the tree that doesn't lose its color, that doesn't lose its leaves during winter. So there is this celebration of death and life within our traditions, within our customs, as it was thousands of years ago and today. And Carnival is now, today as we see it, is the last celebration of life before we enter 40 days of penance, 40 days of Lent, because the feast of spring today, associated through the Roman Catholic Church, is associated with the death of Christ on the church. But however, what is Easter? Easter is the rebirth, that we overcome death, that death is not always the last step. There is a sense of death and life. Obviously, Carnival is, and again, another aspect. During the Queen Victoria era, there was a shift in Western society because of the hardships children were going through by working in factories, that there was this movement that children should be taken care of, children should be in school, not at work, children should be taking, be protected. So there's a shift in the 1850s, 1890s, 1900s, and especially with America now, Industrial Revolution and advertising ideas, this new blend of society that we're looking at during the Second Industrial Revolution. What happens is that in the 1700s, 1600s, 1700s, Christmas and Carnival were mainly adult festivities, not for children. It's only 1880, 1890 where we see a transition where Christmas now becomes focused as a celebration for children, and Carnival the same. So now you start to understand why there are certain behaviors in these two celebrations which we don't realize were meant for adults and not for children. Now, the Carnival has its origins, and it's one of the biggest celebrations worldwide.
From samba blocos in Brazil to masked balls in Italy, Carnival is a truly global phenomenon, celebrated in over 50 countries around the world. Carnival originated as a pagan festival in ancient Egypt to usher out winter and celebrate the beginning of spring. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, the ancient Greeks adopted the festival. The Romans assimilated the festival from the Greeks, and it was later overlaid with Christian meaning to become the festival of Carnevale. The word carne means meat in Latin, and vale means farewell. In the Catholic calendar, Carnevale, farewell to meat, is a feast before the fast of Lent. In 18th century Italy, people preparing for Lent would throw indulgent fancy dress parties and gorge before the fast. As Christianity spread across Europe, so too did the celebration of Carnival. Colonization exported it across the world. Portuguese colonists took Lent to the shores of Brazil, where they had also taken an estimated 4 million African slaves. Over time, European rituals fused with African ones to create Brazil's world-famous carnival. The flamboyant street parties are a celebration of Brazil's mixed heritage, and it's big business. In 2016, the city of Rio alone welcomed 1.1 million tourists during Carnival, contributing around $900 million to the city's economy. On the Caribbean island of Trinidad, the Festival of Lent was introduced by French colonists. Slaves, excluded from these celebrations, created their own parties to the soundtrack of calypso music, which mocked the French. This is now an integral part of Trinidad's carnival. In India, Carnival is only celebrated in the southern state of Goa, where Portuguese colonists ruled for over 4 centuries. Parades occur throughout the state with bands, dances, and floats. Carnival is known as Mardi Gras in the American city of New Orleans and contributes over 2% to the city's GDP. Carnival is not just a party in the sun. Quebec holds the 3rd biggest carnival celebration in the world. From humble beginnings, Carnival has become a truly global celebration, with millions of revelers all over the world contributing billions of dollars to the party.
So, the history of Carnival in Malta. Carnival celebrations were introduced to Malta by Grandmaster Pietro della Ponte in 1535. So 5 years after arriving in Malta, we start to see celebrations kick off. The papier-mâché floats we see today became prevalent at the height of the British era during the 19th century. Carnivals held every February on the weekend and 2 days before Ash Wednesday. The most elaborate float depiction of the Fantastic King Carnival is the carnival's focal point. And this video clip is a bit long, but you'll see a lot of historical facts of the Maltese Carnival. Okay, so here's the interesting fact when you start to look at connecting the dots from the past with the now, language and food. In Italian, carnevale, the word is carnevale. Now, the word carnevale means farewell to meat. So, in reality, when you look at medieval celebration of carnival going back to the Roman era, carnival was the idea of do what you want, have a great party, celebrate. Now, obviously, you're going to eat a lot, drink a lot, and do other things humanly possible, which can be considered sinful. So, in order for no one to know who you are and God not to see you, wear a mask. That's why we have costumes. All right. Now, Carnival is the last in religion. In Christianity, is the last day you're allowed to celebrate before Ash Wednesday, before 40 days of penance. And obviously, that reflects the 40 days of Jesus Christ in the desert before he arrived in Bethlehem and where he was then crucified. So what you have is the word carnevale, meaning carnival feast, and the period of Lent is Quaresima, and the word for Easter is Pasqua. In English, it's carnival. You have Ash Wednesday, and the word for Quaresima is Lent, and the word for Easter, Pasqua, is Easter. In Maltese, you start to see how these three words have kept the same pronunciation and form. It's just a question of spelling. Carnevale, carnival, and carnival. All right, the Maltese carnival. Now, Ash Wednesday in Maltese is Ras Randan, and Quaresima and Lent is Zmine Randan, and Easter is light al-Kbir. Now, where is the word Quaresima coming from? Let me just make this a bit visible for me to read. So in Latin, quadragesima, 40th, meant 40-day period. So this 40-day period is then associated with 40 days Jesus spent fasting in the desert, all right, enduring temptation by Satan, according to the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, before beginning his public ministry. Easter is called Pascha in many traditions, particularly within the Eastern Orthodox Church. So you start to realize how language connects us with the past. The study of words, the study of tradition, study of history of events and customs coming forward, I find that really, really interesting. Now, the word is Pascha is Greek, which means Passover, which is a reference to the Jewish Passover and the Christian celebration of Jesus' resurrection. So Jesus' resurrection also coincides with the Jewish feast of the past, which they still celebrate today. Word Pascha is used instead of Easter to refer to the Christian celebration of the resurrection and to acknowledge a connection between the Jewish Passover and the Christian Pascha. So you have Italiano, Carnevale, Quaresima, Pasqua; English, Carnival, Ash Wednesday, Lent, Easter; Malti, Carnival, Ras Randan, Zmine Randan, or Light. Now, let's associate that with foods. For Carnival, you have Prignolata. You start to see it on the supermarket shelves like 3 weeks before, and then obviously there'll be some leftovers after the Carnival has passed. But the idea is that during Lent, you don't eat sweets. You sacrifice not eating meat, and you sacrifice not eating things that are sweet, that are joyful in life. It's like an act of penance. So you have Prignolata, and this is a Sicilian, Italian influence. During the time of Randan, we have what is called Quaresimal. Now you can see the word Quaresimal, the dessert that you have here, the sweet that you have here. It's very, very bitter though. Okay, it's made of almonds and I don't know how to describe it. You have to try it for yourself, but it has like that hint of anise to it. Now, obviously, the word Quaresemal is coming from the Italian Quaresima. And for Easter, we have the Figola. We also have the Easter egg, now the Easter egg made out of chocolate is more an American English creation of the last 150 years. When we look at figola is basically pastry with almond filling. And it comes in the shape of the lamb, the fish, and other shapes as well. But the lamb and the fish obviously have Christian symbology, Roman symbology to it. Figola, again, coming from Italy. Now, the Easter egg that we have today represents, there are two meanings towards the eggs that we have. And you have half an egg actually placed on the figola in the middle. The eggs initially represent the stones that were the base of the Christ, of the crucifixion of Jesus, that absorbed Jesus' blood. So in Orthodox religions, they actually paint the eggs red. But we also have chocolate eggs. Another aspect of the egg is in Greek Orthodox, the egg represents the tomb of Christ. And on Easter Sunday, in fact, what they do in the Greek Orthodox Church is they grab an egg, crack it open, and open it, and let out the egg yolk and the white parts of it, the clear parts of it, symbolizing the tomb could not hold the body of Christ. Jesus opened it up and rose from the dead. Now, when you look at that symbology of the egg, you can understand how come it comes into Christianity, but we don't know exactly. We don't have association with it except from the past with those two symbologies. In fact, the flag of Vatican is yellow and white, representing the colors of the egg, representing the resurrection of Christ. Now, where does the rabbit come in? Well, the rabbit comes in because rabbits, one rabbit plus one rabbit, so long as, they're male, female, you're going to have many, many rabbits. Rabbits are very, very fertile in producing baby rabbits. So the rabbit is a pagan tradition going back 2,000, 3,000 years, associated with the feast of spring, the feast of fertility, which then was taken over by the Roman Catholic Church as the feast of Easter. When we look at Carnival today, it's more a celebration of color, of life, of joy before the 40 days of penance, of Lent. I'm just going to show you some highlights from this year's Carnival in Malta. You have the Carnival in Valletta, and you also have the Carnival in Gozo. The one in Gozo is a bit crazy though. I went once. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. I've never been again. But what you realize is that throughout the year, throughout the months in a year, there are so many activities happening on the island. Festas, celebrations, concerts, music, art, dance, plays, that if someone says nothing happens in Malta, they're really, really blind and, deaf. Because just look it up, there's everything happening every week. On the 6th of September, for example, there's the opera in the village. Different clips of musical pieces performed by sopranists and musicians. Open air in Piazza of San George, for example. So these carnival floats actually follow a route, and they travel at about 4 kilometers an hour is their speed, their intended speed. So if you're into photography or you want to take up a hobby, there are so many things that you can capture. People who work on these carnival floats do it out of their own passion. They don't do it like a job. It's something that they do for fun, but they do take it seriously. Okay, moving on. All right, so once Carnival has passed, and when you do the history part of it, you look how they celebrated in the medieval times and before, you'll be surprised. It's really interesting. 40 days of Lent, 40 days before Easter Sunday, Zminy Randan Lent. Now this becomes a very solemn, serious period with many, many processions in different villages. So following the end of carnival celebrations, preparation for the solemn Easter festivities commence 40 days before Easter Sunday, Hatelite. The older generation will recall that not so many years ago, fasting psalm on a daily basis was obligatory. Rules in this respect have now been relaxed considerably, and obligatory fasting is now limited to Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. There are also people that do not eat meat and sweets every Wednesday and Friday throughout these 40 days. Holy Week starts during the last week of Lent with Palm Sunday, commemorated a week before Easter Sunday. So let me just walk you through it. So the first Wednesday after the finish of Carnival is Ash Wednesday. In Maltese, Ras Irandan. Ras means head. So it's the idea of beginning. First day of the penitential period for Holy Week, commemorated with a Mass, when the priest will mark the sign of the cross in ash on the forehead of worshippers. The ash is usually burnt olives, olive leaves, or olive twigs. So the symbol of the olive tree, you all know about it through the flood when the pigeon found a tree and brought it to Noah, for example. There's a lot of association with Easter as well. And of course, in Malta, the olive tree was always one of the main industries. So following completion of the Mass, a statue of Christ would then be carried out of the churches and villages across Malta and Gozo Islands. I'm just going to show you some video clips so you get the idea. This is 2019. Let me go here. Where is it? Okay, so processions, people walking in the street. And then eventually going back to the church. What is remarkable is that these traditions now are becoming more and more popular again. And this one is in Zaytun. Again, I'll just show you some highlights from it. So you see what I mean, that you may not be practicing the faith, but as a culture and combine it with a hobby, art, photography, videography, drawing, history, reading, research, language, traditions, customs, there is so much you can embrace and really appreciate. The symbology of color. Now remember when we spoke about the Phoenician era, the Phoenicians were known as the purple people. They created that color, that dye from crushing up seashells. Till this day, the color purple is the symbology of nobility. Purple is traditionally associated with royalty and suffering, making an appropriate choice for Lent. It reminds us of Christ's passion and sovereignty he claimed through his suffering and resurrection. It was used as an act of derision toward our Lord when Pilate placed a purple robe on Jesus, whom he called King of the Jews. Purple thus symbolizes pain, suffering, mourning, and penitence. The fourth Sunday in Lent is called Laetare Sunday. Laetare is Latin for rejoice. In the context of Lent, purple also symbolizes penance, repentance, and renewal. So color, the industry of color purple goes back from today through the Roman period all the way up to the Phoenicians. So we're talking 2,500 years ago, 3,000 years ago. In fact, when you watch movies related to the Roman Empire, like in Gladiator, what you find is that the soldiers who protect the emperor, known as the Praetorian Guard, they wear the robe color purple. Red is associated with the soldiers, purple is associated with higher nobility. When we come to the Holy Week, Il Jimam Atza, Holy Week Il Jimam Atza in Maltese, we have Yumi Duluri, or in English, the Feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. This feast is celebrated with great devotion in Malta on the Friday before Good Friday, with many taking part in a penitential pilgrimage in any town or village in Malta. Traditionally, some of the penitents would walk barefoot or drag heavy chains in penance or in fulfillment of some vow for divine intercession. From Yom Duluri on Friday, then we have Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday is the arrival of Jesus from the desert into Jerusalem. All the parishes in Malta celebrate this occasion. In churches across Malta and Gozo, palm leaves and olive branches are blessed with holy water. The faithful walk in a procession waving these blessed branches. Blessed palm trees tied in crosses or small branches of olive leaves are given to the faithful as a blessing.
Jitfakkar ħadd il-palm il-festa li tiġi ċelebrata ġimgħa qabel ħadd il-Għid u li matul l-Knisja tfakkar is-solenità liturġika ta' dħul ta' Ġesu f'Ġerusalemm mill-quħ bħala re. F'pajjiżna ħadd il-palm jiġi ċelebrat funzjonijiet fil-knejjes madwar Malta u Għawdex u purċissjonijiet biex ifakkru l-episodju bibliku ta' dħul ta' Ġesu f'Ġerusalemm. F'xi parroċċji oħra f'din il-ġurnata joħorġu wkoll purċissjonijiet bil-vari tal-ġimgħa l-kbira. Fil-Pjazza tal-Vatikan iċ-ċelebrazzjoni bdiet purċissjoni. Fil-bidu taċ-ċerimonja l-Papa bierek il-palm u l-frijej taż-żebbuġ biex imbagħad iċċelebra l-quddiesa quddiem baħar ta' nies. Fil-messaġġ tiegħu Papa Franġisku saħaq li l-bniedem għandu jkun umli bħal Ġesu Kristu u sostna li l-poplu għandu jevita trionfaliżmu li jirkeb fuq il-ħidma u l-karru ta' ħaddieħor. Dan fil-waqt l-Arċisqof ta' Malta, Charles Scicluna, ikkonċelebra l-quddiesa ta' ħadd il-palm fil-Konkatedral ta' San Ġwan fejn fakkar li dawn il-jiem huma xhieda tas-sagrifiċċju li jagħmel għalina Sidna Ġesu Kristu. Intant il-kap tal-Partit Nazzjonalista Jidrandelija żar il-purċissjoni tal-ġimgħa l-kbira ta' Ħalarawr u dik ta' Ħalaxaq li bħala tradizzjoni isiru tul il-ġurnata tal-Ħadd. Lejlet il-ġimgħa fil-għaxija Jidrandelija żar ukoll il-wirjiet tal-ġimgħa l-kbira fil-Fgura fejn kellu l-opportunità li jitkellem mad-dilettanti li matul is-sena ikunu għamlu ħidma bla qiegħda biex joffru dawn il-wirjiet lill-pubbliku.
So in that news clip in Maltese, you could see also other aspects that are part of our customs and traditions here in Malta to celebrate the whole period of Lent and Easter. Now, after Palm Sunday, the first Thursday is Hamis Shirka, or Maundy Thursday. This is the eve of Good Friday. During Maundy Thursday Mass, the priest representing Jesus Christ symbolically washes the feet of 12 people representing the 12 apostles. Now, I remember back in the 80s, it was just only men, but eventually now you have both men and women having their feet washed.
Il-ġimgħa filgħodu eluf ta' Maltin ħonqu l-knejjes madwar il-Gżejjer.
Let me just stop that there. Now, after the Mass on Thursday, Maundy Thursday Mass, there is a tradition here in Malta, the custom which is called Is-Seba Visti, or the 7 visits. Basically, it's up to your choosing. You choose 7 different churches to visit where you can offer special prayers said in each. Now, ideally, you go to the churches in the villages which also have many exhibitions open and on display. This ancient tradition dates back to the Romans, so we're talking the Byzantium Empire, okay? Because don't forget, Christianity begins with Constantinople in the 3rd century, 4th century, and at that time Malta was under Byzantium rule.
Il-visti jsiru quddiem l-altari tas-sepulkri li huma altari mżejna fejn titqiegħed l-Ewkaristija fil-perjodu ta' wara l-funzjoni ta' ħamis ix-xirka. Jiġifieri dik il-funzjoni fejn il-qassis simbolikament jaħsel is-saqajn ta' 12 raġel b'tifkira tal-aħħar ċena ta' Ġesu u sibti lejt fil-funzjoni ta' filgħaxija meta l-knejjes jintfew u jinxtelu minflok ix-xamat b'simbolu għall-qawmin ta' Ġesu mill-mewt. Ikun f'dan il-mument li l-Ewkaristija tittieħed lura fuq l-altar prinċipali li f'dan il-perjodu ikun żarmat minn kollox u allura l-attenzjoni u l-qima tal-pubbliku lejn Ġesu tmur in-naħa tal-altar tas-sepulkru li jiġi armat f'kull knisja f'Malta. Imma l-ġimgħa filgħodu u anke matul il-bqija tal-ġurnata apparti il-visti, il-funzjoni ta' wara nofsinhar u l-purċissjonijiet huma ħafna il-Maltin li jsegwu ġurnata ta' sawm u astinenza bikel u xorb mill-inqas. Fit-toroq Maltin, speċjalment bis-swit il-knejjes, il-bejjija tal-ħobs jarmaw imwejjed li minnhom ibijaw il-qaq tal-Apostli, il-ħobsa tradizzjonali tal-ġimgħa l-kbira li ħafna jieklu weħida jew mal-platt ta' nofsinhar. Ikel tradizzjonali ieħor marbut ma' dan il-jum huma l-karamelli tal-ħarrub, il-qassatat tal-inċova, ħobb sażmu u l-qaqoċ.
Here's an example of one of the exhibitions. So you find that the exhibitions have a large collection celebrating the Last Supper, and all these plates are actually what we call food art. The artists use dried pasta, dried rice, and then they add coloring to them. And these exhibitions, usually they are for free, but there's always, where you can leave a donation. The amount of work and the passion that goes into it is really extraordinary. Now here we have a video clip coming from the exhibition of the Police General Headquarters. Here you have the making of their Last Supper exhibition.
L-ewwel ġranet tar-randan nibdew nfittxu l-kwadri li sa nagħmlu bil-melħ, nikkonsidraw il-kuluri li jkellhom, kważi anke nistudjaw il-kannaġġun, minn hemmhekk nibdew il-proċess ta' taħlit tal-melħ. Nibdew innixfu il-melħ quddiem temperaturi sħan biex naqtawlu l-umdità, kif naraw li l-melħ ġien jiexef tajjeb biex jinħadem, nitfgħulu l-kulur li huwa terra tombra.
So basically they start looking, and for the frames they start preparing the salt. They dry the salt so that it loses all its humidity, and then once they see that the salt is dry, they add color to the salt, so now they have different salts of different colors ready to be used for the creation of their paintings.
Nibdew nħaltuh ma' xulxin u minn hemmhekk nerġgħu nkomplu ntellaw il-kwadru fażi.
And of course then they start building the portrait that they wish to display. So basically every year they start from scratch. They start from new and they create new art exhibits. They consult, they design, and they get to it.
Mbagħad ngħaddu għal fażi tal-bidu kif isir il-kwadru. Kull ma nuża għodda hija l-kuċċolina tat-tieq.
In order to paint with this fine powdered salt, colored salt, basically they use a teaspoon and they stick to that teaspoon. The higher up the teaspoon is, the wider the spread, the closer, the finer the spread.
Xi ħaġa sabiħa li tajjeb li n-nies ikunu jafu bħala sena. Il-kuċċolin iktar ma tolli għal fuq, iktar jiftaħlek u iktar ma tinżel l-isfel, iktar tidħol f'ċertu dettall. Ma taraw huwa l-immuntar ta' korazza kif se tiġi bil-lest biex tiġi eżebita. Hawnhekk taraw il-proċess tal-karti li riċiklat kif inhu bħala.
So you can see from the video the materials being used, hardened paper, salt, and they start to set it up. Let me just skip a bit forward.
Ħafna mix-xogħol tal-kwadru speċjalment meta tidħol f'ċertu dettall, kważi peress li l-melħ ikun fin ħafna anke nifs kellek waqqaf ftit.
So they even have to control their breathing because they get so close to the artwork that they don't risk breathing and spreading the salt.
Ir-riċiklaġġ kemm jiġi apprezzat meta toħolqu jew titrasformah fuq ġdid.
għal ħafna ħin li ngħaddu hawnhekk f'din is-sala nagħmlu x-xogħlijiet qed nippreparaw biex nagħmlu il-prodott finali ħanejdu hekk tas-sala kompluta armata. Dan huwa delizzju li bdejnieh minn ċkunitna u wasalna sa fejn wasalna għax tagħmlu b'ċertu dedikazzjoni u mħabba lejn ix-xogħol. L-attendenza u l-apprezzament tagħkom huwa ta' sodisfazzjon kbir għall-korp kollu.
Now we're going to see other aspects in other villages, Sijiwi, Sabavisti. These are all available, just needs you to go and visit them on the particular days. Obviously it has passed, but these are ideas you can see next year for Easter period. So that was things happening on the Thursday. For Friday, Good Friday itself, which is a public holiday, various towns and villages commemorate the Passion of Christ with a solemn procession of statues related to the events of the Passion of Christ, as well as participants dressed up as biblical characters who take part in the procession. The first procession is said to have taken place before the 1700s, followed by Ormi and other localities. This is what I mean by how important the Air of the Nights were in Malta, because a lot of traditions that we have today, Carnival, Christmas in a way, Easter celebrations, Limnaria, Santa Maria, these are all highlights, the village feasts coming out of that period. So there's Mass at 3 o'clock, and as soon as Mass is over, no church can ring its bells, so all bells are tied up. You'll just have this wooden circular apparatus going. You hear it in the background, no bells are rung. And then villages start their processions around about 4:30, 5 p.m., which lasts to about 10, 11 o'clock at night. And you have villages like Zaytun, Hazabuch, Ormi, Mosta, Valletta, Birgu, Isla, and they take so long because they move so slowly that you can actually, if you have a car or just hop onto a taxi, you can visit at least two of them, maybe three, if you go early. So this is video recordings of Zaytun, and now I'll show you the one in Khal Ormi. Of recent, I don't know when it actually began, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but Potinu is a charity organization. And what has happened is that on Good Friday, there has become a custom, a tradition now, where there's this night walk that starts off in Meliha, walks from Meliha to St. Paul's Bay Bujibba, goes to Mosta, Birkei Kara, all the way to Floriana.
Fil-lejl ta' bej ħames ix-xirka u l-ġimgħa l-kbira ħaddu sehem numru rekord ta' nies fil-mixja annwali f'ġest Nobli b'risq Potinu Cares. Fi-stqarrija minn Potinu Cares tħabbar li aktar minn 10,000 persuna ħonqu l-pjazza l-Melliħa mill-post fejn bdiet il-mixja għal ħabta ta' nofs il-lejl. Il-mixja għaddiet imbagħad mix-xemxija mill-bypass ta' San Pawl il-Baħar mill-pjazza tal-Mosta minn Ħallija il-wiet ta' Birkei Kara mill-imsida minn quddiem il-kwartieri tal-Pulizija u intemmet fuq il-fosos tal-Furjana. Ma' dawn in-nies kollha ingħaqad il-Prim Ministru u mexxejla purista Robert Abela. Fuq Facebook, Dr. Abela ippubblika ritratt ma' Joseph Vella missier iż-żagħżugħ Jake Vella. Potinu Cares f'din l-istqarrija qalet li tul it-triq tqassam l-ilma għall parteċipanti kollha u 180 kaxxa larinġ huma irringrazzjaw lil volontiera kollha u lil kull min ħadem bla wafqien biex din il-mixja saret u kienet suċċess.
So it's quite nice to see that new traditions are being created as we go along as well. Sunday. So nothing happens on Saturday, but Sunday is Easter Day, Easter Sunday. So again, more processions, more statues. And again, this procession goes back to the second half of the 17th century. So we're talking 1660, 1680. That's why I tell you, just imagine being born either before the Great Siege or after the Great Siege, and then seeing how society is changing in Malta, especially in the 1600s onwards. Now, what's funny is that many churches and these have the tradition that they actually carry the statue and run up the stairs. Now, it doesn't only happen with the Feast of Easter Sunday, it also happens in other festivals. For example, the one I know of is the Feast of Birkei Kara, St. Helena, which is actually this Sunday. And although it doesn't always go right. So here you see them running up the stairs. And then in one final moment, Madonna! Yeah, us Maltese, we can be crazy. Okay, so Easter has passed now. Now, the next major festival, and I don't mean village festivals, I mean public holiday festivals, is Mlaria. This is celebrated on the 29th of June, so practically around the summer solstice. And it's the Feast of St. Peter and St. Paul. This feast commemorates the beginning of the Roman Catholic Church, its foundations, and it is a direct influence coming from Italy into Malta through the Order of St. John. The earliest of this feast goes back to the year 258. There is evidence of an already lengthy tradition of celebrating the solemnities of both St. Peter and St. Paul on the same day. Together, the two saints are the founders of the See of Rome through their preaching ministry and martyrdom there.
Rome celebrated its patron saints Peter and Paul on June the 29th. The holiday is an important liturgical feast. It honors the two apostles who suffered martyrdom in Rome. This celebration is one of the oldest examples of the transformation of a pagan festival into a Christian one. June the 29th is the date chosen to remember the two apostles and was originally a feast in honor of Romulus and Remus, the two brothers who founded Rome. Christians decided to celebrate the founders of the new Rome, Christian Rome, on that same day.
I Santi Pietro e Paolo che festeggiamo oggi.
As Pope Francis affirmed at the Angelus on June the 29th, 2015, the city has a special affection and gratitude for these men of God who came from a distant land to proclaim, at the cost of their lives, the gospel of Christ. The legacy of these two apostles is a call to live the Christian virtues, especially faith and charity. Peter and Paul didn't die at the same time, but they're united by the fact that both died as martyrs. Peter was crucified upside down, and Paul was beheaded. Peter, in fact, arrived in Rome around the year 50 and began preaching the teachings of his master. Having escaped the persecutions of Nero, he was later persuaded by Jesus himself to repent and suffer martyrdom. Around the year 67, the saint was crucified, upside down at the request of Peter himself, as he didn't believe he deserved the same fate as Christ. The present Vatican Basilica stands right around the tomb of the Apostle Peter. Born with the name Saul, St. Paul's story is different. He converted to Christianity while on his way from Jerusalem to Damascus to suppress Christians in the city. Suddenly, he was enveloped by a powerful light, and a voice, that of God, asked him why he was persecuting him. Such light blinded him and forced him to wander for 3 days in the Syrian city until he was healed by the leader of the small Christian community. From that moment, St. Paul began the work of Christian evangelization. If Peter was chosen by Christ himself to be the head of the nascent church, Paul embodies the missionary soul of the new church. In fact, the two saints represent the continuity of the apostolic mission initiated by Jesus Christ in a fundamental era for the establishment of the principles of Christianity in the pagan world. The solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul, celebrated on June the 29th, was a public holiday in Italy until March of 1977, when it was transformed as the patronal feast day for the city of Rome. On that day at the Vatican, the Pope usually celebrates a Holy Mass with the blessing of the pallium for the new Metropolitan Archbishops. The celebration is followed by the Angelus. Another characteristic event of the day is the splendid Infiorata in Via della Conciliazione, a traditional floral decoration dating back to 1625.
And as you can see here, once you start to open up and searching online, YouTube is going to give you many, many other suggestions, links, and you can start to find a trail through discovery of history. So Hymnaria is one of the oldest feasts celebrated in Malta and Gozo, going back to the new rule of the knights. Now the word Hymnaria is coming from Latin luminaria. All right, so here you can see Latin words in Maltese. Okay, so don't tell me that Maltese is Arabic, because it really, I find it drives me insane. Luminaria means to light up, to show your joy in a way. And it's the feast that's associated with food, religion, and music. It's also held in Busquets, but there are other, and also under Mdina as well. The festivity starts with the reading of the Bandu, an official government announcement, which has been read on this day since the 16th century. Now, Imlaria is also, because you need to understand that this is when from spring, Easter, cultivation of the farms, you now have the produce from farming the land for summertime. So celebrations in the form of an agricultural fair are held at Busquet Garden in Malta and on the eve of 29th of June, and as a village festa in Nadur Gozo as well during the week before 29th. Religious celebrations are held at St. Paul's Cathedral in Mdina, Nadur Gozo. And during the late afternoon, horse and donkey races are held just below Mdina, and the winners will receive the palio, a traditional banner presented as a trophy, which in the old days would have been presented by the Grand Master himself. There is this obsession of horse racing in the streets. Okay, there's another feast that does this as well. Now, summertime obviously is associated with the Maltese Festa, as you all can hear with the fireworks during the weekend on the weekend. The summer festa season in Malta starts around the end of May, throughout the summer until the end of September. So this coincides, with the school holidays, summer holidays, and also with half days, those who work in some companies or with the government. And the festa dates back to the Knights of St. John. The legend has it that Grand Master Durahan, who ruled between 1775 and 1797, encouraged the celebration of church events outside, since he himself loved feasts and merrymaking. These feasts are held in celebration of the patron saint or saints revered in different churches. The villages and towns are decorated with street lights, street drapes, pavilioni, and statues. Specific colors are normally associated with each particular festa. Festas continue to get better and more organized as time goes by. Here you have the statue of Saint Helena of Birkirkara. Saint Helena is the patron saint who is the mother of Constantine the emperor, the first emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. So as you know, the streets are lit up with festuni, statuettes. Soon they'll start preparing here St. Julian's, because ours is the Sunday after St. Helena, Birkir Kara. And also you have foods associated with the festa like ubait and other sweet delicacies. Sometimes my mouth just doesn't want to work. And of course the village band. Now the village band itself links to the British era. Of course they had instruments during the time of the knights, but the instruments you see here are a direct creation coming out of the Industrial Revolution that they could recreate in mass production, metal instruments with parts of wood, creating instruments that you can carry with your hands while you're walking. So you have the clarinets, the trumpets, the trombones, and obviously the moving drums and the drum kits you can carry on your waist as well. Because of that, during the British era, you find many village clubs, music bands opening up, which then became a part of music culture within the villages, and became also like schools for learning, because obviously you learn and then you practice and then you are chosen and you take part in the band during any church activity. Christmas, the village festa, Easter, on Good Sunday, on Easter Sunday, for example, Carnival, etc. Now, I'm going to let you watch this video clip because it is the Maltese Village Feast is recognized as a UNESCO heritage, and whilst they're speaking in both English and Maltese, but you have the subtitles in English.
The Maltese Festa is a Mediterranean expression of faith. It starts from the liturgy in our Catholic parishes and churches, but then goes forth in the streets of our villages and towns. It is an expression of social cohesion, and also a wonderful way we Maltese and Gozzotans express who we are.
Il-festi Maltin ilhom isiru għal dawn il-250 sena li għaddew. U bejn Malta u Għawdex insibu 95 festa li jiġu ċelebrati fl-irħula differenti. Nistgħu ngħidu li fil-maġġoranza tagħhom dawn jiġu ċelebrati fl-istaġun ħanejdulek insejħulu tagħhom li huwa l-istaġun tas-sajf bejn Ġunju u Ottubru, u insibu din l-ammont tal-wien, kuluri u ċelebrazzjonijiet li jsiru fl-irħula differenti fil-festa tipika tagħhom. Kien hemm perjodu fejn f'Malta bdejna naħsbu li l-festi ser imajnaw, mod speċjali fis-snin 60, snin 70, meta kien hawn ammont ta' immigrazzjoni. Madankollu mbagħad minħabba l-fatt li bdiet dieħla enerġija ta' żgħażagħ ġodda li jagħtu semhom fil-festi, in-nisa, it-tfal ukoll li bdew jinvolvu iktar ruħhom f'din il-festa Maltija, nistgħu ngħidu prattikament illi dawn il-festi nataw ħajja ġdida.
Jekk taqta' l-festi fil-kultura tagħna isu ma jibqa' xejn. Jien personali ngħix għalihom, jiġri qed nistennihom.
Apparti nagħmlu sena sieħa naħdmu għall-festa.
U żgur għax il-festa mhux dik il-ġimgħa biss. Il-festa tittaħdem għaliha sena sħiħa, mhux dik il-ġimgħa biss. Jiġri tittamel l-attivitajiet biex inti tiġġenera flus biex tkun tista' tagħmel il-festa.
Il-festa tat-tfal tal-Madonna tal-Karmel taż-Żurriq ikun hemm ħafna tfal jarfaw din il-vara, idawruha mal-pjotta taż-Żurriq bħala devozzjoni lejn il-Madonna.
ħajjarni li nibda nieħu bil-festa għax isni xtaqt li xi darba xtaqt li nerma lill-Madonna tal-Karmel.
So we do the percussion sessions with the children. We do the theory lessons twice a week before everything happened. And I take the ladies choir once a week.
Festa hija propjament festa tal-komunità. U komunità mingħajr ebda distinzjoni bejn il-Malti u l-barran li ġi jgħix ġewwa pajjiżna.
But the fact that the roles that you do, what is so nice is that you do things out of a community spirit that you always do. When you belong somewhere, you like to give something back. But what you forget is how much it is appreciated.
Il-festa għalina hija kollox għax mingħajr il-festa inħossu void kbir. Aħna għall-festa nissagrifikaw ħafna ħin, jiena ngħid għalija nagħmel sagrifiċċji kbar biex inlaqqa l-familja u jkolli ċans ukoll għall-festa, imma fil-ħajja tipprova tippjana u hawnhekk ġewwa l-komunità tal-Imqabba nkunu involutu f'kollox. Aħna bħala nisa qegħdin involuti għandna l-kummissjoni nisa li ovvjament hija magħmula minn nisa, imma barrek għandna nisa qegħdin involuti fil-Kumitat Ċentrali, għandna nisa li qegħdin fis-sezzjoni żgħażagħ.
Issa għandna proġett kif qed taraw warajja tal-Arts, ħadna fondi mill-Arts Council, għandna proġett ta' lezzjonijiet ma' tfal ta' età kważi medja żgħar biex inħajru u nippromovu kemm jista' jkun il-festa. Għandek fejn jidħol injam, fejn jidħol antarjoli u drab li huwa l-iktar li jimla, ma l-iktar li huwa suġġett ta' għarriħ. Pavaljuni, bandalori, bnadar, dak huwa isu section għalih drab. Injam għandek l-injam pedestalli, kolonni, planċier, għandek section ta' dawl, dwal, festuni.
Il-festa Maltija, partikolarment kif ġiet preservata fil-kuntest tawċi, hija l-frott ta' kif matul l-aħħar 5 seklu fuqhom intiżġu flimkien l-espressjoni ta' poplu Mediterranju li jħobb jiċċelebra il-mumenti eżies fil-kalendarju tal-familja u l-komunità, kif ukoll ir-reliġjużità popolari marbuta mal-festi patronali fil-knejjes tagħna. Il-festa hija wieħed mill-aktar mumenti qawwija fil-ħajja ta' kull komunità. U l-Knisja Kattolika tħoss dawn il-mumenti ta' katekeżi u liturġija kif ukoll ta' ċelebrazzjonijiet festivi uħud minnhom jintiżġu wkoll fit-toroq tagħna għaliex huma turija minn barra tal-fidi tal-poplu tagħna.
Aħna nagħmlu n-nar għal-Festi Maltin fuq bażi volontarja. In-nar kważi huwa kollox għal-Festi Maltin, imma l-festa trid tkun kompluta minn kollox anke bil-banet bl-armar hija katina. Hekk ta' kulħadd fil-Festi Maltin isir nar tradizzjonali Malti li jsiru bħal blalen, bħal sfejjer, bħal disinji, murtali tal-kulur u ħafna xogħol tradizzjonali Malti ta' murtali li jimkien fid-dinja ma tara bħal beraq pront, bħal murtali ngħidulhom bil-lob. Jiena min jaħdem in-nar sewwa f'Malta Għawdex inqisu bħala pittur ipitter fuq it-tiela u min jaħdem fil-piroteknika ipitter is-sema bil-wien mill-isbaħ.
Assolutament bħal m'għandek dejjem firħula fejn għandek żewġ festi, sija b'żewġ qaddiesin differenti jew nkella anke l-istess qaddies, ovvjament hemm l-element ta' pika li naħseb timbena l-festa fuqhom u din speċjalment ġer-raħal tagħna hija xi ħaġa storika.
Fil-marċ l-iktar ikun hemm element ta' taqbil li wieħed ġeneralment jintuża biex wieħed jew jiftaħar b'dak li jkun għamel jew nkella biex jinbex jew jinsika daqsxejn il-parti tan-naħa l-oħra b'xi affarijiet li jkunu għamlu jew affarijiet li jkunu marru inqas tajbin, però dejjem tkun fuq livell ta' pika bejn żewġ partiti u li qatt m'għandha tkun fuq livell personali jew fuq livell ta' qaddis. Ħadd mill-perspettiva tiegħi jiena l-pika li nara hija li għal bosta snin kienu banda waħda ġewwa Ħalaxa, il-banda San Giuseppe.
Inti l-ħna għanna storja differenti allura ġviri ma naqblux fuq hekk lanqas.
Tara evidenti hija li aħna festa sekondarja u l-ikbar partit li għaw bħal-10 naħseb l-unika partit li għandu surmas tal-post, għandu numru ta' bandisti tal-post, numru ta' solisti tal-post, apparti ħafna affarijiet oħra.
Aħna mill-ħatana l-enfasi assolutament fuq il-fatt li aħna festa titolari u nħobbu nfakru li l-Gazin ta' San Josep li huma se jibqgħu sekondari, enfasi kbira fuq il-binja tal-Gazin, naħseb ħafna mit-tingiżet tagħna jkunu fuq hekk, u fl-istess ħin naħdmu ħafna fuq li tisemmi Ryan eżatt ġifieri meta jsiru l-paragun tas-saħħa fil-partiti aħna nħobbu ngħidu anke kif intajdu aħna l-iżgħar partit, però ara aħna x'kapaċi nagħmlu fil-verità intukom kedda kull sena, ġifieri l-logħba hija hekk bażikament.
COVID-19 bħad-dinja kollha influenza wkoll lill-festimaltin. Fil-fatt l-istaġun tal-festimaltin kien assolutament wieqaf kompletament. Jiena ħassejt nuqqas għaliex dan l-istaġun tal-festi huwa ħaġa sabiħa li inti żżur ċerti festi biex tara iżbuħija ta' dak li jiċċelebrat. U l-fatt li matul dan is-sajf kien hawn il-baħ dak rigward tal-festi. Ħassejtu nuqqas kbir, mhux minn l-aspett personali biss, imma wkoll anke meta nintaqa' ma' ħbib tiegħi li huma direttanti tal-festi. Huma wkoll ħassew dan il-fatt li ma sarux il-festi. U dan jkompli jirafferma l-fatt li l-festi huma parti mill-ġin tal-poplu Malti. Hija xi ħaġa unika għalina Maltin u Maltin u minnhajrhom perswas li parti importanti tal-identità ta' pajjiżna u tal-poplu Malti tispiċċa.
So that video gives you a very good idea on everything that happens behind the scenes and what's going on within the hearts and the minds of the Maltese when we talk about the Village Festa, preparation for it and the celebration of it. When it comes to fireworks, it's quite remarkable that the level of quality of firework displays in Malta has really reached an international level of great admiration. The Malta Fireworks Festival, let me just bring it down a bit, happens in the harbor of Valletta. This year was held in April, whereas before it used to usually be held in May. It's and all these activities you can watch for free because obviously you watch them from the street. Another aspect of language, history, customs, tradition is how words are created. So, for example, in Malta, we also have these fireworks that are on the street. Now, in Maltese, we call them chichifogu. Chichi, because you start to hear this sound when they light up, and this is insane. These are on the street level, so people are standing next to them, You'll see this insanity even with the horse races when their horses are on the street and people are in the middle of the street. Anyway, chichifoku. So the sound goes, okay? And then because it's made of fire, fuoco, meaning fire in Italian. So now you have this word for these pyrotechnic ground fireworks. You get the idea. Now, the Feast of St. Martin, so after the village feasts usually end in September, with the last one being Nashar, 8th of September, which also coincides with the victory of the Great Siege of Malta in 1565. And then we have the public holiday, 21st September, Independence Day. We also have this village feast, which is called the Feast of St. Martin, which again is an Italian-Roman feast coming from Italy through the Order of St. John into Malta. It is not a public holiday, but it is again growing in popularity. St. Martin of Tours was a Roman soldier with a good heart. After cutting up his cloak to assist a poor beggar on the street, he had a dream which led him to convert to Christianity. St. Martin's feast, known in Maltese Il Festa San Martin, falls on the 11th of November, the same as Remembrance Day or Poppy Day. With this feast, we talk about the bag. Now, this bag includes an assortment of fruits that are associated and nuts that are associated with autumn. So you have apples, pomegranates, mandarin, almonds, hazelnuts, dried figs.
Minkejja li mhux l-iktar qaddis popolari, il-festa ta' San Martin hija waħda maħbuba minn ħafna, partikolarment minħabba l-borża tradizzjonali li ġġib l-isem tal-istess qaddis. Il-festa f'pajjiżna tiġi ċċelebrata fil-Baħrija u din is-sena fil-fira annwali saret l-ikbar borża ta' San Martin. Charles Samut, wieħed mill-organizzaturi ta' din il-fira fil-Baħrija, spjegalna minn fejn nibtet it-tradizzjoni tal-borża ta' San Martin.
Kien ħereġ mit-torri ta' Mjen, kien fuq Ziemel wara wieħed xieħ taħt nofs il-mantel tiegħu, sa kien soldat dak kien dużunur, u flaxija ġallu Ġesu Kristu qallu kif għattejn tintil il-mantel għal ħaneġan tiegħu lek qallu dak il xieħ kont jien. Allora San Martin dejjem assoċjat mal-karità u fl-antik il-Maltin is-sinjuri f'da żminijiet kienu joħorġu dal-frott Malti, il-ġews u l-ġellew sottin u kienu qasmuhom lill-familji Maltin.
Il-qastan huwa wieħed mill-frott l-aktar komuni fil-borża ta' San Martin u għalhekk ma setax jonqos li karatteristika ewlenija fil-fira tkun it-tissir tal-qastan minn Alan Camilleri.
U għandna diversi modi kif issajru għandna pereżempju gradili jiċċaqal u gradili li mexxuhom aħna fuq in-nar, metodi differenti li n-nies ukoll tattirhom għal din il-ħaġa tant interessanti għalihom il-fatti li qed jaraw isir qudiemhom huwa friżgur xi ħaġa li toġobhom ħafna.
L-akbar borża ta' San Martin ġiet konfermata wkoll mill-Malta Records kif qalilna Edwin Gatt.
Però sissa dak li hemm madut jammonta għal iktar minn 278 kilo f'ġews larinġ qastanutin kif huma magħrufin mal-Maltin kemm inħobbu l-San Martin.
So this festivity is held in the village of Baharia, which is past Rabat on the way northwest of the island. Baharia is also famous for its rabbit restaurants. 8th of December, public holiday. It is the Feast of Conception, the Concezioni. It's not a big feast, but it is also the 8th and the 13th, because there are two public holidays in the first weeks of December. It's like the beginning of Christmas corporate parties. Okay, you start to see them building up all the way up to Christmas. Anyway, so 8th and 3rd and 13th of December are two public holidays, and if you're lucky, they end up on 2 working days, so then you have a really long weekend. El Concezioni is all about the conception of when Mary is visited by an angel and she is notified that she is pregnant with child, baby Jesus. Obviously, the timing of it, because then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, on the 25th, we celebrate the birth of Jesus. So, you know, The timing is not accurate, but it is a public holiday, so we're okay with that. And then we come to the Christmas period. Christmas traditions coming from Sicily, coming from Italy, coming through the Order of St. John, quite vast, and of course also during the British period. What you were looking at here is these plants on the left and the right. It's called vetch, in Maltese Julbina. And Maltese buy them, they're very cheap to buy, and Maltese buy them, use them as decorations with the baby Jesus, Il Bambino. So vetch is like these green beans here. Basically, you let them soak in water, and the Julbina grow, and you put them in the dark, in a cupboard in the dark, so that they grow straight up, as you can see in the bottom picture here. Just make sure that the cotton is always moist, and they will grow very, very fast. 2 to 3 weeks is enough. So usually people start planting these and growing these towards the end of November, so that then when they take out their baby Jesus and they set up, and they bring these out. Obviously, what happens is that with time, once they're in the light, the Julbina then wilts down. The Christmas presepio, the Christmas crib. This is a tradition that goes way back to the 13th century, when St. Francis of Assisi decided to build a reenactment of the birth of Jesus with real life people and livestock. The idea soon spread and evolved throughout many European countries until it slowly found its way in Malta in the 17th century. Again, the Order of St. John, the 1600s. So you start to see what I mean by the effect of the Great Siege, and then the knights staying in Malta, and then the rooting and beginning of so many cultural traditions that we still practice today from the 1600s onwards. In fact, you have in Gozo, they like to create the as you go up the hill from the port on the right, there's a place called Little Bethlehem, and that's where you have the reenactment with livestock and live people. Cribs were introduced in Malta in 1607 by Italian noblemen, and since have become part of the tradition. What's remarkable is that you can actually visit many Christmas crib displays throughout Malta and Gozo. Let me just share this video clip with you of a mechanical. So there are two different types of Christmas cribs. There's the mechanical ones and the static ones, the station ones. If you really get into the habit of visiting and becoming more aware of Maltese traditions and customs, you'll start to realize that there's a lot to actually get involved in. As you can see, the mechanical ones display daily life. So you have bakers, fishermen, carpenter over here. And what happens is that the display lasts, for example, 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5, and it goes from dark to daytime, to the evening, the birth of Christ, nighttime, the arrival of the 3 wise men, and then it resets. Now the statuette of the baby, this is coming from Italian, all right? Il bambino is a word coming from Italian, because in Italian you say a baby is bambino. But when we say il bambino, so with the article, we mean the baby, as in the baby Jesus. So the baby Jesus statues are on display with vetch on the left and the right. And as you can see, this has now wilted down and is becoming greening as it starts to sprout. Christmas Eve processions have become more unpopular with children. And what's popular is also the midnight mass, which is called El Prietka Talmilid, the Christmas sermon. This tradition dates back to 1883, so we're talking the British times, the British era, when a young boy by the name of George Sapiano delivered the first child's sermon during the Christmas midnight mass at Loa. This sermon replaces the priest's sermon during Christmas midnight mass. The child learns the sermon by heart during the preceding 2 or 3 months. Nowadays, the sermon may be delivered by a boy or a girl. This sermon by the child, so you can understand that when the child is chosen, how elevated the parents feel. Now, obviously, if your father is the Prime Minister of Malta, you can easily be chosen to give the sermon yourself. This is actually Georgia, the daughter of the Prime Minister, who gave the sermon.
Ejjew nitalmu minn din is-sena u minn Ġisu Bambin kemm huwa aħjar li nieħdu ħsieb lil xulxin u ngħinu lil xulxin. Veru ma kienitx nisbaħ sena, imma xorta nista' nsibu s-sabiħ ġo fiha. Ġisu Bambin għandu pjan għalina u għal din is-sena jitifakkarna naqal valuri sbieħ li
So as you can see, it is recited from memory. There is no script in front of them. The procession of the children started with the late son George Preka, who founded the Society of Christian Doctrine, and the first procession began in Hamrun in 1921, which then spread out through the villages of Malta and Gozo. Each year, children from the museum accompanied the Baby Jesus procession with lanterns and candles and singing Christmas carols. Throughout the time, children started to imitate like what we do with the Easter holidays, festivities. They dress up and play the part as shepherds or important figures of the story in the Bible. And of course, you all know about the lit up streets of Valletta in all the villages. On a personal note, I was really fascinated at what a different experience Christmas is in Gozo. When I was there, Gozo has a different feel. It feels like a countryside, and it has a different charm to it. I feel that, personally, this is my personal opinion, that here in Malta, Christmas in Valletta tends to be too commercialized. It feels too cosmetic. Whereas in Gozo, I felt more of a village rooted to traditions in the past. But that's my personal opinion, covering your faces and everything. So, traditional games and sports in Malta. Traditional games, like those of you who are in your 50s or late 40s, you will remember these coming from the 80s. Here in Malta, there was called Ichirku. Chirku means circle. Basically, it's just a wheel that you push along with a stick, and you would race against another person. See who would get to the finish line first, or who would get the farthest, for example. Poopy, playing with dolls. Passu, hopscotch. And I never knew why the numbers went from 1 to 9, but then there's a reason why this is considered a girl's sport, because the 1 to 9 actually represents the 9 months of pregnancy. I was like, okay. I wonder how that fits in today's society. Another game, which is Shishu, which basically there's a stick on the floor. You have a bat. You need to hit the stick to lift it up into the air, and then hit the stick whilst it is in the air, and see who can hit it the furthest. Zibech, another one for marbles. I remember as a kid, I used to play with marbles in Australia. We used to have, you used to throw your marble to a hole. And if you get it in the hole, then from there you attack the other person's marbles. If you hit that marble, you take their marbles. That's how we used to play it. Many different kinds of games. And of course, skipping rope, habel. Bocce. Now, bocce in Malta, there are still bocce clubs, bowls clubs. It is played over the islands, and it is an Olympic sport. Not the way how we play it. We play it on fine sand, fine dust, and basically you have two teams. You have what is called the lick or el mamma. It's this small one here. it's the team that gets their colored balls, the green or the red balls here, closest to the main ball, the lick or the mama. And then you have these wooden cylinders which you use to attack the other person's colored balls. Okay? There are various ways of playing balls, but balls is considered, you know, quite an upper class pastime. Horse racing. Horse racing goes way, way back to the Phoenicians, to the Romans. You know, I mean, horses have been around with society for a very, very, very long time. So obviously, we know that horse racing has always been part of the military to improve your cavalry, to improve your skills. Now, we know as a fact that popular bareback horse racing dates back to the 14th century, so 1300s in Malta. So we're talking the Normans era. However, the racetrack in Marsa was founded in 1868 during the British era. It boasted one of the longest tracks in Europe at 1 3/4 miles, 2.8 kilometers. And the first Marsa races were held on 12th and 13th April 1869. So this is after the Crimean War in Malta. And of course, this is after Marsa being drained of the marshlands. Horse racing today still exists, and here's the crazy thing. Horse races held in Gozo racetrack as well as on one of the road in Victoria for the Feast of Santa Maria. So for the Feast of Santa Maria in Gozo, you will have up the hill all the way to the piazza of Gozo, of Rabat. You have horses in the street. Now, it's not like, you know, you'll have safety barriers, etc. No. You'll actually have people in the middle of the street looking at the horses coming up the street, and then they'll move at the last moment to get out of the way.
Here Gozo, Malta. Let's watch some horse racing.
Yes, Malta can be crazy. Rowing. We know that rowing in Malta competitions go back all the way to the Phoenicians. Birgu has a history of over 2,500, 3,000 years of history. We know that Birgu and Mdina are the two probably oldest Rabat, probably to the two oldest major settlements in Malta, and then settlements along the routes in the way. The Malta Regatta is held twice a year, 31st of March and 8 September. 8 September being the victory of Great Siege, and and 31st March, the day when the British left. Now, this is in Maltese, but it does show you how serious the regatta has become.
Fil-Birgu nibtet fjamma li kienet ilha mitfija għal diversi snin.
Il-Birgu fuq qudiem, il-Birgu qegħdin jiblu bil-mod il-mod u jgħassu il-Birgu.
Min kelma bejn il-ħbieb fil-pjazza għal proġett kbir u ambizzjuż. Il-maħżen illum sar ċentru ta' ħajja minn filgħodu sa filgħaxija. Ħidma bla waqfien mill-kumitat u volontiera. Dan kollu taħt it-tmexxija tal-President tagħna Dizma Tart, maħbub mill-Vittorio Zani kollha. Bħalissa qed nippreparaw u nittrenjaw biex ma nċedux pulzier u biex niġbdu għal sidirna u nimbuttaw. Xemx u xita sħana bart ħassibna fil-kanal, natu kollox għal flok tagħna. Bħal-familja maqudin, bħal-familja ngħaddu mid-diffikultajiet, imma bħala familja nippruvaw noħorġu rebbiħin, naħdmu u nistingaw flimkien biex titla' xemx ġdida.
Another important race in Malta is the Rolex Middle Sea Race. This year it's happening on the 18th of October 2025. It starts in Valletta, Malta. The boats sail up to the left side of Sicily. They go around Sicily, coming down the other side, and they come back to Valletta. This is a really extreme rich sport.
Breathtaking scenery and relentless competition. The Rolex Middle Sea Race. This year's race brings together over 100 entries from 26 nations to the Royal Malta Yacht Club.
Yeah, the mud, it's always unpredictable and the weather shifts super quickly.
The start line is incredible.
The 606 nautical mile course begins and ends in Malta. It attracts a perfect mix of Corinthian and professional crews who compete for the most coveted prize, the overall winner on handicap. Swiss entry Caro will be looking to carry momentum from their Rolex Fastnet victory.
We're feeling good this year. Now we're here in Malta, completely different set of circumstances, completely different set of weather conditions, and it would be absolutely amazing to pull off a result here.
But so too will the young crew aboard Red Bandit after their Rolex Euralia win.
New situation, new game. Normally we're good in light wind, so in the northern part of Sicily we expect quite a bit of a changing light wind situation. Hopefully we can take advantage. Let's see how it goes.
First to leave the stunning Grand Harbour were the multi-hulls, followed by 6 separate mono-hull starts, increasing in size at exact intervals. This race is set to be a meteorological puzzle for the entire fleet. The team that pieces this together and maintains their composure in this compelling competition will win the Rolex Middle Sea Race on corrected time.
Music and folklore. Now, when we come to traditional music, although it is recognized by UNESCO as a heritage, it's what we call Lana. Now, Lana is music of the peasants, the Maltese society of the time. It is still performed today. It has a mixture of both Spanish, Arabian influences. And whilst we have a history of traditional musical instruments, obviously in today's musicians, they prefer to use the Spanish guitar, as you can see here. Now, Ana is basically same tune, very slow, melodic, shows you the pace of the time, the mentality of the time. And Lane, the main singer, will sing a song, not as we understand it today, more like creating poetry. And the aspect, the main importance of Ana was that the Ane was making up the words spiritus pront, meaning on the dot at that time. So what happens is that it's like one starts singing, then another one takes over, and they're working on other people's parts. Today, sometimes you also have women taking part in Ana.
كنت فرصي مال الأول تعبطني.
Okay, so you get the idea. All right, so don't be surprised if you hear this at a festival, at a feast, at Limnaria, at a traditional event, at a heritage or a Maltese night. It is a national identity. Here you have the traditional band playing even traditional instruments, as you can see here. On the left, the arch-shaped guitar, tambourine, accordion, and basically it's like a drum.
Inni indoq minn meta kelli 6 snin, fil-fatt kont bdejt bil-kitarra meta kelli 6 snin, naturalment imbagħad ma' żminijiet anke frixt fuq strumenti oħrajn. Il-kitarra hija waħda mill-istrumenti naħseb li tajn il-bniedem biex speċjalment meta jkollu xi ftit stress ħatajnu joħroġ minnha. Għandi il-grupp kif qed intarawni llum ukoll qed indoq magħhom huwa fil-fatt grupp bħala Taverna Folk Band huwa grupp folkloristiku Malti niffokaw ħafna fuq il-mużika Maltija, tradizzjoni u speċjalment nagħtu fokus lil żgħażagħ u żgħar. U jkun jafu huma t-tradizzjonijiet tagħna, l-eruq tagħna tal-Maltin u l-Awċin minn fejn ġejjin. Jien hawnhekk ġejta tal-għodu ġewwa x-xahar għall-festival tat-tin. ġibtu koll il-sħabi miegħi li jidoqqu l-istrument. Il-mużika inżomma bħala parti integrali minn ħajti. Fil-fatt kelli accident bil-motur, kien daqsxejn żmien ikraħ, però grazzi għall-mużika jiena irnexxieli nissupera kollox. Naturalment bil-karattu tiegħi nipprova dak li jkun tiġbed lill-udjenza lejk għax fl-aħħar mill-aħħar jekk tkun waħdek fuq il-palk u ħadd ma jagħtik rasek min se tagħmel xi ħadd ma jkun jaf bik. Però aħna irnexxielna biżminiet u bl-esperjenza li min ikun qiegħed hemmhekk ħaġġibu miegħek. Li nagħmlu ħanagħmluh dejjem għan-nies għax in-nies qed jieħdu gost
u jkompli jieħdu gost, aħna malli naraw in-nies jieħdu gost, awtomatikament bub ħafna enerġija u nagħmlu minn kollox.
So from traditional music, we go now to philharmonic music. And this is what always baffled me and surprised me. Why is it that when here in Malta, Malta Tourism Authority, companies promoting tourism in Malta, we always promote the low-level skills of the Maltese society or the culture of the poor society. But when you look at the fact that we had two opera theatres in Valletta, Manuel Theatre and the National Theatre there, the main theatre, that opened up a lot of art of high-level quality of performances. And in fact, even now, we have the Malta Philharmonic Orchestra taking part in many cultural musical events, especially in Gozo. In Gozo, you have the two theatres, Astra and Aurora, which are opposite each other, where as you go up the main street to the Piazza of Rabat Gozo, where you saw the horse races, okay? In October, you have these two main theatres producing different operas. And in fact, also, they started to produce in May. One thing that I love to do is go up to Gozo. I don't do it every year, but if I see an opera that I like, I go up to Gozo for 3 nights, 4 nights, you know, and find a nice hotel. If you're going to go by car, you need to park next to the theater. You can park behind it if you know the parking areas, but you need to get there early. So what I normally do is either I find a hotel next walking distance, or obviously we're with car and we go early. We have an early dinner at say 5:30, 6 o'clock dinner, and then we just cross the street to go to the theater. Theater, usually you need to be seated by 7:30, and you expect the performance to end by about 11:30, because there are intermission breaks, etc. And you have a beautiful evening of it, you know. A lot happens in Malta, a lot. There are no excuses to say that Malta, there's no culture, there's nothing happening. A lot happens.
L-Orkestra Filarmonika ta' Malta għal dan l-istaġun il-ġdid qed jipproponi programm sinfoniku u orkestrali wkoll versatili fejn jidħol udjenzi differenti. Ħajkunu qegħdin jieħdu sehem f'opri differenti, kemm l-opri ta' Għawdex, l-opra li ssir it-Teatru Manuel, minn kompożizzjonijiet kbar bħal il-Bruckner Night, il-Verdi Requiem, biċċa mill-opera tal-Alpino, għandna wkoll l-anniversarju tal-Beethoven Night li dis-sena tiċċelebra 200 sena minn minnhom kitbet. Ħaterġa' tieħu sehem definittivament fil-programm Mużika, fil-kunċert orkestra, u għandna wkoll kollaborazzjonijiet ma' entitajiet oħrajn fejn konna korijiet involuti mal-orkestra, kif ukoll kunċerti maħdumin mill-Malta Youth Orchestra fejn jimmirħu iktar fil-mużika u jkollhom iktar opportunità x'adapitada daw ħajkun il-mużiċisti futuri tagħna bħala membri fil-Malta Philharmonic Orchestra.
Il-Malta Summer Festival kien l-ewwel festival li kien produzzjoni tal-Malta Philharmonic Orchestra.
U nemmen li dan il-festival li tellajna fis-sajf għall-ewwel darba bi speċifikazzjoni fuq l-opera tat opportunità biex l-orkestra mhux biss turi l-ħiliet tagħha, il-kapaċità tagħha, imma ġi flimkien it-talent lokali ma' dak barrani.
U anka fejtu l-artisti għadna ħafna attenti li ninkludu artisti ta' ċertu portata, ta' ċertu fama internazzjonali, mhux biss li jipparteċipaw mal-orkestra, però li jaqsmu l-stage ma' artisti lokali.
It was a wonderful experience from both sides, and also from the personal side, to be here, to be working with this unbelievable team, with the MPO, that is an orchestra that has such a wonderful heart and such a wonderful soul. We collected not only many articles and news from different newspapers from abroad, but also a lot of interest in the artistic and community, especially in the opera community.
Qegħdin niddiskutu l-possibiltajiet ta' proġetti li kienu fil-festival biex nesportawhom barra minn Malta. U dan kien wieħed mill-iskopijiet ta' dan il-festival.
L-Orkestra Nazzjonali, l-Orkestra ta' pajjiżna, l-Orkestra ta' Malta hija sinonima mal-eċċellenza. Mal-eċċellenza fil-kamp kulturali u fil-kamp artistiku. U biex l-orkestra tkompli mixja l qudiem u tkompli ssir aħjar, irdu nkomplu nkunu kreattivi u innovattivi u noħorġu produzzjonijiet ġodda li joffru opportunità li jġibu flimkien it-talent lokali ma' dak internazzjonali.
Now, to change the pace, what I love about this video is that it is the U2 song Where the Streets Have No Name, performed by the Malta Philharmonic Orchestra. But what's really cool is that you're going to see Malta without any people. How they filmed this, I don't know. But kudos to them. So from soft rock, we're going to go to a concert held in 2015 by Joseph Calleja, who's internationally known for his voice. And this is, they're performing Nessun Dorma. This production was held on where? Floriana Fossos, where most of them do happen. Please enjoy. Another famous international opera singer Maltese is Miriam Gauci. So when it comes to opera is Gozo. October, you have the two. Usually one opera is held mid-month and the other one is held 2 weeks later. So this year, actually, Opera Aurora House, Teatro Opera Aurora, they performed on the 3rd of May, Nabucco. If you don't know the main theme from Nabucco, Hebrew Slave, well, here it is. This is not a Maltese production, it's an Italian production, but you will understand the power of opera music. In this October, there's also the opera by Puccini, Tosca, 23rd, 25th October. So you're not at Teatro Astra, okay? So I just hope one day you start to realize what is available on the island. When it comes to dress code, the main dress costume, of course, were influenced always by Sicily in the past. You have the lonnella. This actually died out in use in the 1950s. However, you might see it in being used in either Maltese events, festivals, nights, Malta nights, plays, or in traditional films. Transportation. Now, the main form of transportation is the initial one was the steam train, which was launched in 1883, linking Valletta with Indina. Coming out of Valletta, the tunnel below, where the lift is when you enter the city, it went underground, came out in Floriana, and then crossed overland into Hamrun. In fact, there are streets called railway streets in Hamrun, Birkirkara. There was a station in Birkirkara, another one in Hattard, Hamrun as well. And this would run a few times a day. It kept on running for 50 years until its last operation was 31st March 1931. Why? Because the combustion engine and the buses provided more flexibility, able to cover the whole of the island. And of course, we'll look into that in a moment. Just going to share with you some clips, collection of photos here in the video. When it comes to buses, the first bus was similar to the one on top, but then eventually we have these buses which are now back on the streets again. The lower bus, this orange bus, the colors, at first the colors indicated the route. However, obviously that's not practical if you want to quickly fill in a gap because, I don't know, a bus broke down or it was needed or you were updating the system. So eventually the color codes were like where the bus driver was from or village, and the numbers here then were able to be changed, and the bus route, the number told you where it was going. In the past, all buses were leading to Valletta. Today, buses, of course, because of the EU, the old buses, once we joined the EU, the old buses became immediately illegal because of accessibility. You could not get on the bus if you were in a wheelchair for sure, or in crutches. It was very difficult. And in fact, I remember seeing old people, to get off the bus, they would walk backwards, holding to the rails one step at a time. My memories in the 80s going to school, we'll have these buses to pick us up, public buses to provide school transportation, and being the first onto the bus on my route, we would always sit in the front part here next to the driver, because that was where you had the engine and which was very, very warm, especially in the winter time. And what was interesting is that us 14, 15-year-old boys the driver would tell us many, many dirty jokes whilst surrounded by statues of Mary and Jesus and some other patron saint. It was hilarious. Good times.
Dak iż-żmien konna nirranġaw aħna kollox, u mbagħad spiċċajna bit-2011 u ma bqajniex. Mela jien Rejmu Buttigieg, noqgħod ħażabbar, jekk bdejt bix-Xarabanks beda d-dadi tiegħi, ma kellu Xarabank kellu Diamond T 2881, u mbagħad kellu Bedford żgħir 2374 kien jaħdmu fuq ħażabbar, kien jaħdmu ħuti kollha biha. But fin-1978 kont xtrajt bassiena, xejk bassiena u bdejt minn hemm. Jiena għalija bħala kultura sbieħ ħafna u jalla jibqgħu sejrin kif bdew issa għax il-Maltin jixtħuhom ħafna. Qishom iċċaħdu minnhom kif noħorġu b'xi karozza minnhom ma jgħaddix tifel għadu jitwielet li ma jħares lejha u jibda jitħares. Jidilha mami, għara dik il-karozza dik kienet il-bass tal-linja ta' qabel. Ma jispiċċaw għadu il-karozzi. Nħossni ma nixtieqx li jispiċċaw. Nħossni ħafna bihom.
And of course, our harbors are filled with the traditional Maltese lutsu, brightly colored fishing boat with the Eye of Osiris, going back to the Egyptian era, before the Phoenicians. That's how old this icon is in the Mediterranean here in Malta. And again, the colors indicated which harbor you are from.
Bek nistat ma ta' kon żgħir, kon missieri fil-mozzijiet, imma l-ewwel missieri kien għamil qasba u xlief u ċomba, jiġifieri kont immur nistatal tal-qiegħ biex lief, bil-qasba. L-ewwel li bdejt, mhux ħanajdlek meta kolli 6 snin, għax meta kelli 6 snin kont immur. Imma l-iktar imbagħad qisu minn meta kelli 14 sena l fuq. Tkun ħierex ma' żernieq, jibda jżernaq fil-bot u tibda tiela x-xemx. Sewwa ma' x-xafaq ikun hemm il-baħar u tara nofs ballun aħmar. Mhuwiex dajsa li tiġri, dajsa li timxi bil-mod, imma l-baħar għax xogħol tajjeb ħafna. Biss mbagħad il-kuluri hemm xi wieħed jaħseb fuqhom għax hemm il-mustaċ hemm ta' fejn hu abjad, hemm ta' fejn hu isfar u ta' fejn hu aħmar. U dawk kienu biex meta kienu jkunu fuq il-baħar dari kont tara lutzu, jew tara da minn San Pawl, dak minn Għawdex. Lajn tal-lutzu jiena kont ngħid, narah biex nara sabiħa fuq il-lutzu, imma missieri kien jgħid illi lajn superstizzjoni kemm xi kollhom jisu bħal good luck fuq il-lutzu.